Good morning. I'm declining note takers because we're recording this. Um, so, and we will send out notes. Oh, it's nice to see some familiar faces and names. Hope everybody's having a great Friday thus far. Um, I think we were gonna do an icebreaker. Yep. You can unmute if you're muted and share what your favorite thing about summer is in the chat or say it out loud or put it in the chat. Off to a great start. I can't talk already. Debbie, I think, are you still up for sharing? Okay, beautiful.
I'm slow, but I did it.
You got it. Yeah, if you
Do I
go
have
into
it in?
present mode,
Okay,
um,
there we go. I did it.
beautiful. So first of all, if you're able to, if you're not driving or, able to, no worries. But if you're able to rename yourself so that it reflects your name, chapter, and role, I will do that in a second. I'm not just women in mining. Um, so I will be Julia, WIM Arizona and WIM USA president once I get finished renaming. WIM Arizona USA president. And if you don't have an official role, no worries. You can say member or whatever makes sense. Midnight sun, I bet, is your favorite part of summer, Elizabeth. That was my favorite part of visiting Alaska when I did 15 years ago. Um, in the summer, I miss green grass here in Arizona. If there is green grass, usually in my mind, that means I get stressed about water usage and wastefulness. Uh, Camping is great too. My favorite part about summer is I work at a university, and as much as I love the students and they're the best part of my job, it's also really nice to have like a calmer, quieter time at my place of work. And so I really enjoy that as well. Um, I used to do more camping, but now I'm in Arizona and I'm not as good at camping in the desert, I feel like. I'm gonna trying to see if I'm able to control Debbie's screen.
Oh, sorry, I'm back.
I'm gonna shut my office door because my dogs are really frisky today. Um, I don't know if I can control this. I was able to
You know what? I think I
control,
didn't log in through our Zoom account. I logged in
no worries.
straight. So I'll have to, I think I have to control it.
No worries at all. All right, planting tons of flowers. I love flowers. Um, we get them more here in the spring. So pool popsicle chips and sandwiches. Yes, they do. I have been trying to convince my brother-in-law to install a pool in their yard. I don't have enough room for years, and he says that
You're
only if I
welcome. You're
yeah,
welcome to come over whenever you want.
good to know. I might take you up on that. All right, so this is session 2 of our WIM Governance 101 series. The goal is to provide some practical guidance. Oh, Debbie, you can't hear? Or that's Dee Dee. I'm sorry, I read that as Debbie. I was like, Debbie, please don't leave. Dee Dee sent something in the chat that she can't hear us. She doesn't have audio. So um sounds like Mackenzie doesn't either.
I can hear you.
Okay. Um so this is the same slide that I showed for last meeting, kind of about the reason why we're here. When we did the chapter president listening tour about, I guess, last fall mostly, a lot of what I heard from the presidents was that they wanted more guidance and tools and templates, et cetera. And they had a lot of questions related to governance that I remember also having when I was a chapter president. And so we put together this series and we also created a collaboration space, which we're going to spend some time looking at today, to help with that and to meet that need. And so I won't spend any more time on this slide, but that's kind of the overall purpose. And just a note that the meeting is being recorded, and we will add slides to the collaboration space, which we will share a link to. If I have, yeah, we'll share a link to. I think I'll have it later in the presentation, so it'll be easier for me to share then. Um, and so if you are representing a chapter and your president couldn't make it and they wanted to or whatever, they can go watch the recording if helpful. We had another session on May 19th. I think we have not uploaded that session yet, but we will shortly, where we talked more about kind of leadership and governance, like structural things. Today, we're going to talk a bit more about operations and management. Um, and the plan is to offer this series annually moving forward. And um, would love feedback on things that weren't covered that should have been if we spent too much time on something, because this will kind of be a great way for new chapter leaders as well as USA leaders to kind of get oriented, if that makes sense. Um, so we can go to the next slide, I think. We went over this in detail last time, so I won't do it again today, but this is our latest and greatest kind of structure slide explaining WIM USA's leadership body. And so we made some changes to this recently. Our board was at over 50 and I think even over 60. I think most recommendations that you read say you should keep a board to about 12 people. So we're considering how to make sure that everybody feels represented, but also make it a bit more manageable. And we made a step in that direction by we made our student chapter reps part of the leadership body, but they're not voting members of the executive board. Um, and then we also reduced the votes of the chapter down to one so that only one national rep had to be there. So all chapters still have the same amount of decision-making power. It's just one vote rather than two votes. We were having a hard time sometimes getting to quorum. The students have a hard time. They come and go, they graduate, etc. And so sometimes those chapters are more active than others. And so that was the reasoning behind that change. Everything else is relatively the same. We did make some updates to our committees. And so committee chairs were on the board always, but the committees are just slightly different. And then the national reps, what we think that's going to look like basically, because a lot of the chapters have that there's two regular reps and one or two alternate reps, et cetera, in there that are elected, is basically at the start of a meeting, the recording secretary, Debbie, will ask you to let us know who's giving the votes for today. That's what I run a board as part of my day job, and that's how we do it because we have like 4 or 5 different representatives from each company. And then the at-large reps, we changed that process a little bit this year too. It was kind of nebulous, like how exactly those were selected. They are now selected and elected, voted on the same way an officer is. And we also included some language in our bylaws that states that if at all possible, at-large reps should represent regions that of the people that they represent, essentially regions that don't already have a state chapter, because we want those folks to be from places where they don't have state chapters having events all the time, and therefore they're motivated to help, make sure the at-large chapter feels as connected and brings as much value as possible. That was a really quick summary of the changes and the current state of things, but in the recording of last meeting, we went through this in a bit more detail. And I'm also happy to answer any questions you might have. We are going to have a short kind of national rep orientation at the end of the first board meeting, or sorry, the next board meeting as well. So we can also answer questions then. Oh, and one thing I forgot to say at the beginning, if you have questions today, don't be afraid to put your hand up or virtually, or, unmute. There were some really good questions and points last time made throughout. And so if you have questions, I talk pretty fast too, so don't be afraid to say, can you slow down or say that again? I'll be happy to do that. Um, I have a post-it that says slow that's been up there for years that I forget is there all the time now. But if you do have questions, don't be afraid to speak up. So we're going to talk a little bit next about elections and officer terms and succession planning. I will note that our chapter leadership meetings, formerly called chapter presidents meetings, we've changed that to chapter leadership. It's really open to the president to share the meeting with everybody else. It's if they want to send the vice president instead or a different member of their board, that's fine. We went through in January ahead of this year's elections a pretty detailed best practices and suggestion in terms of typical process then. And so we're not going to spend too much time here, but all of that information is in the WIM USA collaboration space. And we will likely make our monthly chapter leadership meeting about that in December or January again this coming year to refresh everybody's memory and make sure everybody's thinking about things. But basic best practices are follow your bylaws. And if your bylaws say something that doesn't make sense to you, last week we talked about the fact that you don't want to be making bylaws updates every year. You want some organizational stability. But what I always suggest is kind of keep a running list of potential updates. But if it is something really big related to like elections, then don't be afraid to make an update. Basically, if you're for some reason you're not able to follow your bylaws, that's usually a good trigger to update your bylaws. Use a nominating committee. The nominating committee is often made up of the existing officers and committee chairs and chaired by the vice president. Um, it's a great way to ensure that whoever's getting nominated for positions is somebody that, is well thought out. And maybe if it's a committee chair, they haven't been involved for a long time, but they come with a background that we know would fit well into a role. A lot of times it's not, chapters will, maybe not in their bylaws, but in their policies and procedures have something that says, ideally you've been involved for a year or more before you're nominated. It's hard to make that a requirement just because we are a volunteer organization and you don't want to hem yourself in too much and not be able to fill out your board. But a nominating committee is a great way to help the members that eventually vote on your selections know that the people that are being put forward are people that the existing leadership feels can carry the torch on effectively. And then you present a recommended slate from that nominating committee. One thing I always like to note is you do not need to have more than one candidate. In some cases, it doesn't really make sense to at all. If the members are presented with two candidates that they don't know anything about, it can be just difficult to make those decisions. But at the same time, there are times when it does make sense to put forth two candidates. And I know that has happened in the past without any issue. But I think the biggest question we always get is it really an election if we're only voting for one? I would say if you look at Robert's Rules of Order, if you look at the way that other nonprofits run, it's very, very common and oftentimes recommended. And again, the nominating committee, your members are putting trust in them to put forward the most effective person and the person that is going to carry the chapter forward in a positive way. Communicating expectations clearly. Um, just making sure that people understand what they're in for. Because what are your expectations? Do they need to attend every single leadership body meeting? How often are those meetings? Can they miss 25% of them? Is it okay if they miss as long as they send, if they're a committee chair, co-chair, or a committee member to report out? We're volunteers. Nobody's going to make every single meeting for every single, chapter. So I really encourage flexibility, but also laying out clear expectations so that if somebody really isn't living up to a leadership role, that you have an effective means of communicating how you need them to change, and eventually maybe you look for somebody else the next election or appoint a cycle of appointing chairs, etc. Planning for the quorum, basically just get your ballot out soon enough to make sure you hit quorum if your bylaws have a quorum. I think Arizona's quorum is pretty low. It's like 20% or something like that. We have a lot of members, and so 20% of 300 people is 60 votes or so. Make sure that you're able to get to whatever your quorum is, and a lot of times that means have your ballot out for at least a week or two. And then to us, USA, it's really important that you respond to Stuart with your updated leadership information. We want to be able to communicate with your chapter leadership effectively. And so when he reaches out and asks for the updated leadership, ideally, he's also getting headshots, et cetera, so that he can update on the website at the same time too. So please make sure to respond to that when it happens. And then I just put an example process down here. So kind of what we'd recommend December or earlier, the nominating committee starts reaching out to potential candidates. It might be existing chairs to say, do you want to do this again next year? It might be, does the vice president want to run for president? Is the president running again, et cetera? Just confirming all of that. Like I said, it's often chaired by the vice president. And so that's a big role often of the vice president. And so they're calling either a meeting or, an email chain, or if you're using Slack or something like that, to just start discussing who fits where, what are the roles we have to make sure we have on a ballot, and who makes sense for each of those roles. And then in January, ideally the slate has been agreed upon, or you're discussing it and really like locking those things in so that you can submit the slate to WIM USA. We will set up a ballot for you. That's not required. It is recommended though. It's just really nice to have like a third party set up the ballot for elections rather than, if you've got somebody that's being elected setting up the ballot, it can just be kind of awkward. And it just helps us maintain consistency across WIM USA. We use a tool called Election Runner. It's worked well for us, and you'll just need to send Stuart headshot, short bio, list of your slates, and then we always recommend that you include a write-in spot. A lot of times that's required, and the write-in spot for each section can be really nice. A lot of times people will write their own name in, and then that's kind of a trigger to reach out and say, hey, do you want to get involved in WIM? You're typically not going to get enough write-ins to elect somebody that's written in, but it's a nice way to get some names for potential future leaders. And then have folks vote in March. You can leave it open for the whole month. You can leave it open for 2 weeks, whatever makes sense to you, just so that you're ready to announce new leadership and onboard them in time for the new fiscal year. Most chapters' fiscal year is April 1 to March 30, and that's what this recommended timeline is based on. And if your fiscal year is not that, shift it by 3 months in whatever direction works for you. Again, the nominating committee, just a little bit more information there, pretty important part of the process. So any questions on election processes before we go to the next slide? All right. Terms, continuity, and succession planning. So typical officer terms, most officers are elected annually, but then expected, or they can serve a maximum of about 2 or 3 years. I always like there to be at least 2 years as kind of an expectation. If somebody has something come up and they can't serve out 2 years, or you're kind of in a transition time where you're not able to find a president that wants to commit to that long, no, it's not a huge deal. But I always think like that first year, you're kind of figuring stuff out and figuring out who your volunteers are and what your leadership style is and how to really bring the chapter together. And then that second and maybe third, depending on your bylaws, you're actually able to like work really well with that team and move stuff forward. And so you don't have to necessarily put um, specifics in the bylaws, but a lot of times the maximum term will be in the bylaws, so they can't serve more than 3 years. You can be as firm with that as you want, I believe, in your bylaws. If you're part of a chapter that struggles to get people involved, you might want to have your verbiage be something like recommended maximum term is X, so that you do have some flexibility there. But then in policies and procedures, you can provide more details like suggested service length, et cetera, and how you handle suggesting that, if that makes sense. Again, I mentioned this a lot in the last meeting. Policies and procedures, to me, those are kind of a living document to a certain extent, whereas bylaws, you only really want to update every 3 to 5 years. That's like the true rules of operation. And so you want to have some consistency there and not be changing them all the time. Healthy chapters, ideally, you're able to plan transitions before they occur. You don't want somebody to, move on and then have no idea who's going to lead the chapter next. Start identifying future leaders early, like the minute you're president, start thinking who's showing up, who's, coming to the table, who's showing that they care about this organization and might be interested. And I'm a big fan of being like, as soon as you start, maybe not as soon as you start thinking that way, but early on saying like, would you be interested in president? Like as soon as possible, and getting their feedback and making sure they know you're not making any promises because who knows what the nominating committee is going to put forth or how the rest of your term is going to go, but just finding out who's interested. And ideally, the vice president is interested because they're there and seeing how you operate, but that's not always the case. And that's okay that it's not always the case. Honestly, more often than not, it seems to tend to not be the case. But that would be great if that was the case. Document responsibilities, again, that's just great for expectation setting and ensuring that balls aren't dropped. Giving committee chairs leadership opportunities. I always like if you've got a really healthy chapter and you've got a good volunteer base, a great way to find out if somebody wants to be president or serve in an officer role is give them a chair role first. And then keeping election processes clear and predictable. So making sure that you're communicating, throughout the year what the process is so that you're ready for it when the time comes and that everybody understands what that process is. It's really, I like to, if somebody's first getting involved in a role that is considered like a voting member of the board, whether it's a chair or an officer role, give them the bylaws. And if you have a policies and procedures or Paloma just showed me there, they call it their operations manual, I think. Have them read that first before they commit to anything and you appoint them and they run. It's pretty dry reading usually, but you don't expect them to memorize it all, but if they've read through all of it, then they have like an idea at least of what they can find there. And so make sure that they're reading that information and that you're communicating that that's an important part of it and that you're also just kind of communicating the reasons behind everything that you're doing. Um, and again, just whenever possible, officer candidates ideally have a track record by serving on a committee, whether they're leading it or otherwise, because just that election is that kind of point. I've been involved when officers have stepped down and we've had to replace people. It's not the end of the world, but also not ideal. Whereas chairs, that's a great role. If you don't have somebody to fill it otherwise, if someone brand new comes in and is really motivated, there's no reason not to get them involved in a chair role. I can go to the next slide, Debbie. Chapter operations and meetings. So I think I forgot to say at the beginning, chapters have a lot of autonomy. So everything that we talk about here today is for the most part suggestion, not direction. So we're just trying to provide you with like a structure and a model, but each chapter is a little different. And so you may vary quite a bit from certain parts of this, but be aligned elsewhere. None of this is necessarily required, especially if it's not in the bylaws. But these are suggestions in terms of different types of meetings and how often you meet. Leadership/board meetings. I think when I was president of Arizona, we met every other week. It was COVID. We might have met weekly, honestly. We were all looking for something to do. We were meeting a lot and it was great. But then we realized once COVID, things started opening up, we spaced the meetings out a little bit more because people just couldn't keep up with that weekly structure. So, matching it to volunteer capacity and how active your chapter is makes a lot of sense. We would call that meeting the all hands meeting. And so that was open to officers, chairs, and any committee volunteers. So anybody that wanted to attend could attend. Ideally, the chairs and officers were there. And if a chair couldn't, they'd send a co-chair or a committee member. Or we always had our agenda document editable so they could go in and like put some bullets about what they were working on or report out that way if they couldn't make the meeting. As president, I had an excellent vice president. Maria Bertram, and I used to travel a lot for work. And so if I couldn't make it, she was really in tune and she really stood in and took on that vice president role really seriously. And I was really lucky and grateful for that. So she'd run the meetings if I couldn't be there. You could do these once a month. You could do them twice a month. You don't want to meet so much that you're exhausting your board. But at the same time, those check-ins are really important. We implemented monthly committee leadership and officer meetings at the USA level last year, and it made a huge difference. And I think everybody was really happy to have there be just regular check-ins. And then annual membership meetings. Most bylaws will require an annual meeting of the membership. I'll be honest, the first year I was president, I didn't realize that until like 6 months in, and normally we would have had it in April. And so I called a quick October meeting of the membership to meet that goal. It was, again, COVID. I think that was partially why we would have normally had it in person in April and then everything was shut down. But typically, historically, that's often where elections would happen. Now, most chapters and a lot of nonprofits that are as large as we are, with as many members as we have, or different chapters have, will often do that electronically. But it's usually aligned with that so that you can announce the new officers, et cetera, provide updates, introduce those folks to everybody. And then also financial reporting. It's important, in my opinion, to really make sure the members know that the chapter is financially healthy and responsible. And so I'm all about transparency when it comes to that kind of stuff. You can meet virtually, in person, hybrid, whatever makes the most sense for your chapter. Committee meetings, again, I would leave that up to the chair, how often they meet. You can provide a suggestion, but let them kind of decide as long as they have a really good understanding of expectations. I would say a lot of common practice is for subcommittees to meet once a month, and then they also come to their all hands or leadership meeting so that they've only got like two meetings that they're having to always be at a month. So 2 hours a month, and then there's often a lot of time outside of that. Depending on the committee, you might meet a lot more. If you've got really active programming, Arizona Programming Committee used to meet once a week, leading up to events like the month before, but then space it out. Certain committees do not need to meet all that often. Like a lot of bylaws committees certainly don't need to be meeting even once a month, but it's nice to have those folks in your all hands meetings because they can be a great resource and you can kind of delegate making sure that certain things are in line with your bylaws to them. But in my opinion, I think it's smart to provide some guidance to the chairs, but let them kind of decide how often they need to meet. And then member events and programs. Outside that annual membership meeting, a huge part of WIM is offering a opportunity to connect and share experiences. I think that's part of what makes our organization so powerful. And so I would recommend, we're going to actually spend more time on events later here, but quarterly is a really good goal for that, offering events to your members. But we'll spend some more time talking on ideas for events and how to get the word out for those shortly. You can go to the next slide. Running effective meetings, I really like at maintaining a shared space where you have an agenda, document, and notes so that people can get in and add stuff as they think of it. And then when you all come together and meet, you, as a president or whoever's a committee chair, you kind of know that what folks want to talk about. And then you don't have to remember to share the agenda ahead of time. I usually still would try to send like a note, like, hey, reminder, we've got a meeting. And take a look at the agenda, et cetera. Make sure to update it ahead of time. But if you don't have capacity to do that, it's there and ready for people to see. I'm also a big proponent of starting and ending on time. We are all volunteers. We do not want to waste our volunteers' time. It can be kind of awkward, but at the same time, having like a parking lot for when people start to get off track, I am not afraid to interrupt and say, I think we need to refocus because we don't want to go over and we have a lot of things to get to. And so find a way to do that politely and respectfully, but in the long run, to me, it's most important to respect volunteer time. And I need people to remind me of that sometime. I'm a talker. And so I like everyone to know that it's okay to remind me that I'm getting off track. And so having like a parking lot or an area where you're parking ideas that people have or discussions that are going to put you over that need to be carried on in the next meeting, I think is a really smart way to help that. Or maybe one-on-one after the fact. And then documenting decisions and action items. A lot of this is pretty obvious stuff, but just want to have it all in black and white for us because these slides will go in our governance space. Sharing follow-up reminders. If you've got the capacity to send out an email afterwards, Arizona has a corresponding secretary now, and it's so nice because as president, there's a lot going on, and the recording secretary is working on minutes, et cetera. It's really nice to have a corresponding secretary. We can say, hey, can you grab the action items that the recording secretary has, documented and get those out to everybody? Or, hey, can you reach out to everybody ahead of the meeting and remind them of what their action items were? And so having a corresponding secretary can really help share the load of that kind of stuff. And then just keeping records accessible, have a shared space, whether it's Google Drive, that's what USA uses, or Teams, or whatever it might be. And then done is better than perfect. You'll hear me say that a lot or say something along those lines. You might not have the time to distribute every agenda in advance, but the fact that you're hosting the meetings and that's your goal and you're doing the best you can is what's most important. And yeah, again, the one time that I think it's important to remember it's okay to interrupt, redirect when you need to keep things on track so you're respecting your volunteers' time. This is just the suggested starting point. Mentioned it earlier, but board leadership meetings monthly, twice a month if you've got, enough going on that that makes sense. Quarterly for membership events, and then committee meetings, letting the committee chairs kind of decide how often they need to meet. And if maybe they're not achieving the goals or they're not living up to what you were hoping, you can always jump in and suggest that they start meeting a little bit more often, or maybe you suggest volunteer to attend the meetings if you aren't already. But I would leave it up to the chairs. It's really nice for them to have ownership and feel like they're truly leading the way. All right. Any questions on all of that? The meetings, running them effectively, cadence, etc. Quiet group today. Um, Chapter programming and events. All right. So a lot of questions that came up when we did the presidential listening tour were around how do I start hosting events? What does it look like? I could use some ideas like should we always have a speaker, et cetera, et cetera. And so I listed out some common event types here. One thing that WIM Arizona used to do these really intricate events, and we still do these really cool things. But during COVID, we did a couple of things that just took a lot of work. And then I remember once stuff started opening up again, I was like, I just feel like it's also okay to throw a party every now and then. And so, again, one of the most powerful things about this organization is bringing people together. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any structure to all four events if you do four in a year, but one, just having it be where you all get together and network and celebrate something. I'll have an example of that on the next slide. Professional development workshops are great. A lot of times, facilitators will volunteer their time or do it at a reduced rate for a nonprofit like us. Site tours and field trips, and then education outreach or student focused events. It really kind of depends on the makeup of your chapter. We talked last meeting about how each chapter has to kind of choose at least two of the WIM USA commitments. And so if your chapter is really focused on education, maybe more of your events are education and outreach focused. California is a great example of that. If your chapter is more about empowerment or inspiration or advocacy, then maybe your events are more around professional development or scholarships related, a big scholarship celebration if you have a scholarship program. It depends on your chapter, but we want you to have some ideas. And also, if you're unsure or you're trying to plan an event and you're struggling with something, reach out to us because if we don't have experience with it, we have a pretty good understanding at times of what's going on at different chapters, and we might be able to connect you with somebody at another chapter that has done something similar that can help you with some of the planning. For when it comes to events, advertising early and often is really important. Not only does it increase attendance and participation, but also we get a lot of complaints about that from our members and from our advisory board. If we're not advertising at least at the minimum a week in advance, that they really want to participate, but they have busy schedules and they can't get it on their calendar. I think like as just as early as you can. If you know something's going to be on December 12th in July, why not do a save the date in like September or whatever, makes the most sense for your organization. Open up registration if you need it as soon as possible. And then just increase the amount that you're advertising leading up to it. I promise you it'll increase registration. And it also will keep your members and supporters feeling like you're listening to them because more often than not, that's one of the more common pieces of feedback that we get. Sharing workload and building events around volunteer capacity. Again, if your event is something where you just meet up at a picnic or a park or something, meet up at a park and have a picnic because you don't have the capacity to organize, a really intricate workshop or something along those lines. Just bringing people together if you don't have capacity during a certain time of year, in my mind, is good enough. Consider putting on a virtual or hybrid event once or more a year. Arizona, and again, a lot of my examples are from Arizona because, of course, I've been involved with that chapter for 7 years. Several years ago, we hosted a virtual trivia, where people in Baghdad, Morenci, Safford, I think, Miami, and here in Tucson, and maybe Phoenix as well, they all were in like big rooms and had a bunch of different trivia teams, and we did kind of a hybrid in-person slash virtual trivia thing. My team won, no big deal. But and it was really fun because it helped us feel connected across the state and allowed people to attend that can't just drive to Tucson all the time, where a lot of our events happen. And then there was an in-person component at each of the different locations for the most part, either before or after, like a happy hour or something like that. Idaho does events like that because they're pretty spread out. They don't have like a really central hub city. And so that's a great way to kind of give people a bit of both. Utah does a lot of partnering with other organizations, or they have in the past. They've partnered with SME Utah to great success, is my understanding. So if it makes sense to merge, there's nothing wrong with that. I always like to say charge a fee because if people don't have any skin in the game, they'll just register for free and not show up, and then it's really hard to plan. Even if it's only $5, I think Arizona, the standard is used to be at least $30 for non-members, $15 for members. So it's not a lot. Often, if you are provide, I would say scale that based on how much you're providing at the event, right? Like if you aren't giving them food and drink or anything like that, maybe it's only $5, or maybe it is free if it's just a picnic. But if you're giving them food, drink, etc., don't be afraid to charge something. People put more value on things that they have to provide some resources for. These are just some pictures. I literally just Googled women in mining events and found pictures on the internet from people like posting to Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff. Of the one on here on the right here, I know is from Arizona's what's become a bit of an annual Hispanic Heritage celebration. I believe this is a WIM Denver outreach event around Halloween. This might be Idaho or Alaska, and this is Montana. Just pictures of WIM members at different events. And then here you're just going to see a bunch of different flyers. Oh, I thought I updated this one. I hope my updates are in here. Oh, it's the next slide, Debbie. Sorry. Apparently I made a copy instead of I just found another flyer I wanted to add. Just like some actual real tangible examples of events. Again, if I don't have your chapter here, it's just because when I Googled WIM Idaho events or WIM whatever events, it didn't pop up as having a flyer easily accessible. So please don't feel left out. But Denver does these really cool sip and swing events. I think once a year. That's a flyer from that. This is from the SME Utah, or sorry, WIM SME Utah Gala that happened ahead of the SME conference this year. This is a workshop here in the middle. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think you probably can't actually. Yeah, Debbie can follow along with me. A workshop there in the middle, top middle with Debbie Himzel that Arizona's been putting on every December associated with the SME Arizona conference. It's usually either leadership, professional development, mentorship, something along those lines. Another AZ example, just their Hispanic Heritage Celebration. I understand this year it's going to be more expansive in terms of the different heritages that they're celebrating, but it's historically during Hispanic Heritage Month. There's been mariachi bands, there's been dancers, DJs, Latin food, blah blah blah, piñata, all kinds of really cool stuff. A speaker at an Idaho event in the top right here. Bottom right isn't really an event so much as California hosts a teacher education conference or has in the past to educate teachers on mining and help them give them tools to bring back to their students. And so that's a really cool initiative. I know it takes a lot of work, but just an example of something California is doing. Got a golf tournament from Texas, pickleball tournament, I think also in Denver. I don't remember hearing about this floral class in Nevada, but it sounds super cool and something that I would love to be a part of. And so it was an event organized in Winnemucca to create your own floral arrangement. I love to go to Trader Joe's and buy like a bunch of different flowers and put together my own arrangement. So I would have loved that event. I thought that was really cool. And then this is an event that Black Hills hosted, I think, just last week, a summer kickoff in the park. And so, again, I liked that one when I found it because I really like the idea of if you don't have capacity or a lot of dollars, I don't know if this is the case for them, but just finding a park and having a picnic, everybody brings their own food, etc. Probably wouldn't charge for that kind of thing, but a great way to get people together when you don't live in a place like Arizona where it's too hot to do that in parks in the summer. We could do that in the spring or fall instead. Um, Event planning tips and tricks, just keep it simple. I already mentioned this. Like, you don't necessarily need, it doesn't, I would say maybe not every event should just be a basic happy hour social, but don't be afraid to do that. Planning it around an activity can be a way to, it might sound like more work, but if it's not like some big fundraiser, just having there be an activity there like bowling or pickleball can be a lot easier than coming up with like your own program or activity. And then again, just matching the event complexity to volunteer capacity. What do you actually have the capacity to do? And again, if you need to keep costs low, a picnic or purchasing their own food and beverage, maybe you don't charge registration or it's really low. A lot of companies will donate space, but you'll never know if you don't ask. So I'm the queen of asking for things. And often people say yes. If they've got really nice space, ask them if they'd be willing to let you host something. A lot of times it's a way for companies that maybe can't give otherwise, feel they can give in kind of an in-kind way. And then please post your events on our calendar, send them to Stuart. I love it when the WIM USA calendar makes it clear that we're a really active organization. So if you're not already doing that, you just have to send it to Stuart. If you want to include registration, he can make a registration page for you, obviously not required. But we'd love to have that on the WIM calendar, and it also gets the word out to a bigger audience, especially if it's virtual and you're willing to allow others to join. They'd be able to access it either at the on the calendar or if you advertise to LinkedIn, we can do it for you or reshare your advertisements, etc. And again, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. The most successful event is the one that actually happens. So, if you're not sure what to do, post a picnic and talk about it. What should we do in 3 months? Would be a great way to move forward. Any questions on events or ideas or thoughts, confusion, comments?
I have a, um, have we ever looked at doing like a virtual trivia event for all of the chapters together?
That would be a great idea. Yeah, that'd be a really cool WIM USA or all at large. I almost said all hands event. Yeah, I like that suggestion. We'll have to send that over to Kat, our programming chair.
Okay.
Great suggestion. I love trivia though. Kind of competitive. Um, all right. Committees. Building effective committees. Committees work best when expectations are clear. The first thing we did last year at USA was go through each committee and write out a description of what that committee's goal is, what they're responsible for. Um, it is essentially what will probably be the start of Mackenzie and her team's policies and procedures document because it might change quite a bit just depending on what's going on in a given year. So it can be editable. I sent it out to all the committee chairs, asked them to provide feedback, do you agree that this is what your committee's goal should be? But it's a really good touch point to go back to. And sometimes I need to be reminded I'm asking the wrong people to do stuff. And it's a nice touch point for me to be like, oh, right, that actually falls with this committee sort of thing. And so that I think really helps kick committees off, help them understand like what they're actually doing. It sounds obvious, but is often forgotten. Giving the chairs ownership. Um, I probably already said that a couple times this presentation because I really feel strongly that the most successfully run chapters are chapters that recognize that as a president or a vice president or whatever, you just can't do everything. And not only is it important to delegate so that you don't burn out, it's important because people don't feel committed if they don't have skin in the game, if they don't feel ownership. I know I'm that way. If I'm the chair of a committee and everything, but in only name, then I'm not going to care as much as if the president is actually letting me execute my vision and come up with ideas and move things forward. And my ideas are heard and my autonomy as a leader and my team's autonomy is respected a bit. With all of that said, like you're always there to guide, you're always there to step in if things go wrong. And also a reminder that things will go wrong and it's usually not the end of the world. We're not doing brain surgery, it's a volunteer organization. Give your chairs room to fail. And if they do fail, help pick them back up. And if they fail again and again, maybe they're not in the right role and you got to find somebody else, but that's okay. Um, Ideally, the work is distributed. Some committees, it makes sense to just have like a chair and a co-chair, or even just a chair, depending on the chapter and the committee. But ideally, if you've got a committee that's doing a lot of work, if you have a really active programming or events, hopefully you've got some committee members to help out with that. And then also that work is distributed across the committee too. So if you are a chair, not being afraid to ask things of your committee members, and making sure that those that are helping out feel valued and understand how important they are to the goal. Common pitfalls, too many committees too early. I think like Arizona has like 8, but that happened over time. Like when we realized that too much was falling on one committee. As the chapter grew and we had more volunteers, we added committees. I think trying to staff 8 committees for a brand new chapter would be really hard. So in the last call, we talked about kind of some of the core committees. And I think we said that was programming and events because it's really important to provide your members with a place for connection and to bring them together either virtually or in person. Education and outreach I had in there, it could go either way on that if education isn't one of your major commitments. And now I'm going to forget. Oh, membership. Membership's really important. And then I can't remember what my fourth. Oh, fundraising and sponsorship or partnership, however you want to form that committee, or if you have a couple of those, you need money to do stuff. And so paying attention to your sponsors is important. The members are really why we're all here. So having a committee is important. And then that programming events is often why the members join. So making sure that you've got a communication mechanism with the members, often that's either the membership committee or a corresponding secretary's job is really important, and just providing them with value, which is often through events, programs, education outreach activities, etc. Unclear responsibilities, again, really kind of laying out what each committee is responsible for and also what you expect of a chair. I mentioned that earlier. How often should they be showing up to meetings? Like, do you want them at every single meeting that your leadership has? If it's only once a month, probably. If they can't make it, then ask them to send a delegate. And if you say, like, if you can't attend 3 out of the 12 meetings this year, or make it a goal to attend at least 9 out of the 12. I would say always be flexible on that. Different people have different things going on, but just make sure they understand like what you're looking for. Ideally, all at a bare minimum 8 or 9 or whatever, however many you meet, 75%, whatever that looks like for you. Again, just spreading around the load and not micromanaging your committee leaders. Give them the structure and the guidance so that they understand what their goals are, and then let them execute as long as they're there and able to do so. And then I guess I'm just reiterating this a bunch. Give chairs room to lead. Progress is more important than perfection. Small bumps during transitions are normal. And then if somebody is truly struggling or you're not sure what to do because you have an officer or a chair that's not showing up in the way that you expected, or you really need some extra support, don't be afraid to reach out. Like we don't have all the answers, but we can help you navigate, or give you ideas. And we're happy to chat about that kind of stuff anytime. Chapter culture and volunteer engagement. So, a quick reminder from session 1, communicate early and often. We talked a couple weeks ago in the meeting about how because we are all volunteers and not everybody will necessarily make every meeting, it's important to repeat yourself a lot, which can feel kind of crazy, but it's often necessary, I found, to just continue to remind people, here's why we're doing this, here's what we're doing, here's what we need from you. Giving in volunteers meaningful ownership again. Recognizing contributions and celebrating wins. We're all doing this in our free time. And so when somebody's going the extra mile and putting in a lot of effort, I know how impactful it can be to just have that be recognized. And it also just keeps them coming back. And then creating opportunities for future leaders. I already talked about succession planning, but if you've got a committee member that's super active and you think can be, providing a lot of value, give them room to do so, and don't be afraid to give them space to do so, and get them in early and try to keep them around, because that's how WIM thrives. Assume positive intent is something that I always put in like the USA meeting guidelines, etc. Um, that there's definitely drama from time to time in any organization. And my thing is always if I feel if I'm in a bad mood or I feel like somebody's irking me, I try to take a step back and be like, they probably have no idea how much this is bothering me, and just assume that we're all here for the right reasons. We're all coming from a good place. It's not because they're not committed enough necessarily. I feel like I've learned that everybody's always going through something. And so assuming that they're either messing up or not showing up or they're saying whatever they're saying because of that or because they don't fully understand your intentions or maybe you don't understand theirs goes a long way in an organization like this. I try to do that at work too, but I just think it's like especially important here because if we're causing a lot of friction or we're getting mad at people all the time or we're just assuming the worst of everybody and not giving them the benefit of the doubt, they're not going to keep showing up. And so I think if somebody seems to like cross a line or upset you, I'm not afraid of conflict. I think it makes relationships stronger. But at the same time, like approach any of those conversations with curiosity, like why did you do that or whatever, if it's something bad enough. And also I always like to for myself like wait a day. Am I still mad about this tomorrow? And if not, probably it's not worth talking about. Or write it down and wait a day and see if it's still worth sending that email or that message or whatever. And so again, the goal is no drama, right? But anytime you get a group of people together, that can happen. All right, we have 2 hours scheduled. I always like to factor in a little bio break because sitting at a desk for 2 hours straight can be tough. So, how does everybody feel about taking 5 minutes or so for a bio break and coming back at let's say 11:20 or sorry, for me it'll be like 11:27-ish if that works for everybody. Quick bathroom, drinks, and we'll start again a few minutes before the half hour. And I forgot to ask if people had questions on committee stuff, so we'll start with that when we get back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Slowly but surely. I will open up any questions about committee suggestions and structure ideas, if anybody has them while we wait for to make sure everybody's back from the break. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Financial and legal basics. A lot of this is a little not tricky, but things differ by state, etc. And so if anything doesn't sound right to you, let us know. We've got several had lawyers review various things. We've got an accountant with USA that helps us out a little bit. We might be able to get answers for you, but this is again like guidance, suggestion, etc. Financial responsibilities that every chapter should be aware of and have. So an annual budget, that's pretty important. A lot of times the process around that is the treasurer plus or minus a finance chair if you have it. Will put out a call to your committees or officers or whoever that your leadership might be, asking them for budget requests. WIM USA sends around a spreadsheet where there's a tab for each committee where they list what they're asking for money for, how much, and then they also then rate it by priority, like it's absolutely needed for dated, operating at this year, or a nice to have, or I can't remember what all the options are, and then some notes to provide more information, so that it can help make decisions around what to actually put in the budget. And then typically that is voted on and approved by your board. Financial records, of course, are also important. And so you need to maintain that ideally on in your shared workspace, so that you're able to go back and understand why certain decisions were made, et cetera, and just audit yourselves as needed. An expense approval process. Arizona, I think, has a Google form where you sorry, they just re-implemented in their operations manual a thing where if you're spending, I'm going to use example numbers, these might not be exactly it, like less than $250 or less than $100, I think it is, there's not necessarily an approval required, because we just want, if you're hosting an event, and you're a committee member that's there and you got to go run and buy some soda or something like that, you to have some freedom there. If you're spending, I can't remember what the limit is there, it's 100 or 250. If you're spending less than 500, or between, let's say, 250 and 500, a chair or an officer can approve. If you're spending between uh or over 500 or over 1,000, I think it actually is, and it's not budgeted, the whole board has to approve. So I realize I remember well and do a good explanation, but I can send that example out. But giving some tiers, I think, is the point, so that your committee members, if they're helping out at something, they've got some autonomy and they know that they're not going to have to spend their own money. If they, if that's an issue. But then also having there be something where a chair can approve it, or a officer, but ideally everything's budgeted, but of course all kinds of things change throughout the year. So if it's budgeted, you don't need approval at all, but beyond that, what amount can you spend without that, et cetera. And then some sort of documentation of those expenditures, and how does it get to the treasurer? How is it reimbursed? A really good understanding of that. And then regular financial reporting. We, as a USA organization, report out at our quarterly board meeting every quarter. So every board meeting, there's a treasurer's report so that everybody understands where we're at financially, and there's a lot of transparency there. And then annually, it's reported out at our big annual meeting. There's usually a lot more people at, and so we leave some more room for discussion there, et cetera. But the treasurer's report gets voted on and approved every quarter. Key principles are transparency, accountability, and documentation. We're a nonprofit, we're a member-run organization. Transparency is really important. So making sure that if people have questions, they have a means of asking them. And I'm a big believer in there's no reason why people shouldn't know how we're spending our money. And so making sure that if there's a process for reporting out to your members or your board, et cetera. And then accountability and documentation. I always say the treasurer's role is the hardest and the least uh celebrated, but I try to celebrate it more than any other role because it's an important role and it's a tough one. Financial controls, some simple practices. I put a little cute dinosaur in here. Debbie built the slide for me originally, so she's probably going to be mad I put a pink dinosaur in here. She hates so much I add pink to everything. But uh, separate financial duties when possible. I really like if you have the volunteer base that you can add a finance committee to have that person work closely with the treasurer, and then you can kind of audit one another. It's not that we don't trust people, it's that like you just want to maintain that transparency and have those kind of controls in place so that everybody that might not know the treasurer has trust that there's, a lot of accountability and understanding there of more than just one person controlling all your money. Of course, never mix personal and chapter funds. That's important. I bank at the same bank as WIM Arizona, and so I just have to hit like a drop down to switch back, back and forth between the two. I don't so if you I bank at Wells Fargo, so does Arizona. And so anytime I check Arizona's balances, which I don't really do anymore because I don't have a need to because Paloma and Melissa have control on that, but I'd always have to I'd be terrified that I'd forget to switch that back over before I transferred anything. So mistakes can happen, but obviously just never mix personal and chapter funds. Keep receipts and supporting documentation, review budgets and account balances regularly. Quarterly, I think, is a really good cadence for that kind of stuff. You can build that into your leadership meetings, however you want to do that. And then ask questions when something doesn't seem right. Don't be afraid to ask questions about the money. We present it quarterly as at a USA level for a reason. We pause for a long time and we want people to, if something doesn't make sense to them, speak up because it might not make sense to somebody else. We'd rather spend time explaining it than have there be questions out there. And again, good financial controls aren't about distrust, it's just about protecting all of us. Annual compliance checklist. So most chapters have to file some sort of state report with a corporation commission or something along those lines. I think in Texas, it's like once every 4 years, Debbie, you said, and it's like $5. Arizona, annually, you're supposed to file a report. I think it costs $40. And Colorado, we checked, I think it was 25. That's where WIM USA is incorporated. And so you have to file that report, and usually it's really straightforward. It's like you're listing your officers, and then you're paying a small fee and answering a couple questions. That responsibility will often fall with the secretary or the treasurer. It's not necessarily finance related, so your recording secretary, often that's their responsibility. That's an easy one to drop. I can say from personal experience. Usually states are pretty flexible and it's not that hard to get reinstated, but that's an easy one to forget. And then probably the most important, completing annual tax filings. If you don't report, I think for 3 years in a row, you can lose your nonprofit status. Debbie's nodding her head. And that's a huge mess because USA then has to help you with your fund, and it's just a big mess. And so taxes are the main goal of the treasurer. The one thing the treasurer really needs to make sure they do is file taxes. Debbie made this nice summary. So if you have gross receipts less than $50,000, you can file the 990N. Revenue less than 2,000 and assets less than 500,000. Form 990EZ, and then the 990s for larger organization. A lot of chapters are here, kind of depends though. Are in that top line. USA, I believe, is, are we a 990 now, Debbie? Yeah. And so creating a calendar or like I said, Paloma sent out the operations manual to WIM Arizona recently that really clearly states like when the deadlines are and who's responsible is really important because you don't want to I would say the taxes would be the worst thing to let slide. You don't want to lose your nonprofit status. That's a lot. That's difficult process to go through to reinstate it. So, and then I think I forgot to touch on those last two check boxes, but basically updating your officer information, on your state reports and anywhere else that that's needed, and then updating your bank account signers after elections. It can be a huge pain depending on the bank, and depending on the geographical distribution of your board, but it's important. Sorry, Debbie, go ahead to the next slide. And then insurance and risk management. So WIM USA, as of just a few years ago, started maintaining a directors and officers liability insurance because of the size and complexity that the organization had gotten to. And then we also get specific insurance for the annual conference typically. Often the venue will require it. And our D&O liability insurance, I think, is like $290 a year or 390 or something like that. And then the event specific is also a few $100. And so those coverages are there because of the size, complexity, assets involved, et cetera, and the risk profile of the overall organization. I don't think, and again, this is why I say it's kind of tricky. I don't want you to like not go out and get insurance if you really think you need to, because I'm saying that I don't think it's necessary for chapters to get every chapter to get D&O insurance. I would argue that most nonprofits the size of our chapters do not have that. But having it for a specific event where liability is a concern, or the venue requires it, certainly is something to consider. Using waivers when appropriate is something to consider. And just, thinking about the complexity and the risk profile, essentially. We maintain that insurance because of our scale. We don't necessarily recommend that every chapter does. Evaluate your activities, risks, and resources, and think about it whether or not coverage is necessary. If you have questions about that, reach out. We probably will not know the answer right away, but we can add. We've got some friends, some either people that we actually pay or that help us in a variety of ways, legally, et cetera, that we might be able to refer you to help answer some questions to help you make decisions around that. But my understanding, and with the caveat that suggestion, not direction, is that nonprofits the size of a typical chapter, it's pretty common for them to not necessarily need the D&O liability insurance. All right, resources and support. We're flying through this today. I'm talking fast and you guys are pretty quiet, so we will probably end early. But first of all, WIM USA can help with governance questions. We can help with all kinds of stuff, but this is a short list. Governance questions, elections. We help with bylaws reviews. That's a big chunk of the purpose of our bylaws committee. New chapter development, our membership committee helps out with that. The membership platform support, Stuart and our membership committee and our officers, I was just tinkering around in there yesterday, work on that. It is not perfect. In fact, we are considering exploring other options, but we currently maintain the one that we have. Sponsorship ideas we can help with. Also, if you are leading a chapter, you have probably worked with or heard from Emily Hagena. We're really trying to streamline and be more consistent with our sponsor reach outs moving forward. We got some feedback that it just felt like either they heard from us way too much or they heard from us once a year when we needed money and weren't able to provide feedback. And if they couldn't attend the advisory meeting, there was no forum for that. And so we're implementing an annual check-in with all of our sponsors. Emily Hagenau is overseeing that with help from Lacey, doing a great job at it. We do not want to take anything away from chapter relationships with sponsors. So if there is a known connection with the chapter, she will always reach out to you, invite you to those meetings, ask for your thoughts on those meetings, if you want to be there, what role you want to play in them. We're asking for feedback on WIM USA, but we also, want to help facilitate interaction between the chapter and the sponsor if it doesn't exist already. And so by no means do we ever want to take the place of any relationship that you have. We just want to ensure that all the sponsors feel like they're paid attention to, valued, recognized, etc. And so she's always asking for feedback from them. She keeps a really good documentation of that. And we've made some really positive changes already just based on what she started doing in less than a year ago. Financial templates, we can show you our budget template. We can show you our budget request template, etc. We'll likely eventually upload something like that to the collaboration space, which I think we'll talk about next. And then event planning resources. And by that, I mean Like we can set up your registration page. We can give you ideas for how to host an event. We can, if you want to have a speaker come, but you're not sure who to ask, provide suggestions for that. So reach out anywhere, anytime if you have interest. And then Terrence is asking, with us being in a similar industry but different organizations, is there a requirement to complete compliance or code of ethics training? There's not a requirement, but I don't actually know what that is. But so the answer is no, but I wouldn't be against exploring whether or not we should have some sort of code of ethics training. I actually do not hate that idea at all. So I'll do some research on that, Terrence, and if you want to shoot me an email and set up a meeting to discuss it, I would be happy to do that.
That might be beneficial for us to do that.
Yeah, especially like the fiscal officers and stuff like
Yeah,
that too, you know? Yeah. One thing
I,
that we've been talking about doing, but we're seeking some help to move it forward is to host like maybe semi-annual, twice a year treasurer, finance chair, and maybe even reporting, so depending on how it all comes together, meetings so that there's a space for the treasurers to ask questions and make sure they are in compliance, et cetera. And so that's something we'll research before we kick that off for sure. But yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Um,
great question.
yeah, great suggestion. Next slide, I think. All right, the collaboration space. I don't know if this link's gonna work. Oh, you know what, Debbie? Maybe I'll take over sharing for this. I ended up just linking the space because I started linking um every other thing in the space and thought, well, I'll just link to the space and then they can see everything from there. So maybe I'll take over sharing for a second, Debbie, and then I can just share the collaboration space quickly. Oops, this is the wrong Google to do that in. Here we go. So the homepage, probably need to update some of this. But the WIM USA collaboration space is something that we started working on, Stuart and I and others at WIM USA. Everybody can see my screen, right?
No,
Oh, oops. I don't think I ever committed.
there you go.
There we go. I will share this link in the chat to the collaboration space. Recommend that you bookmark it. Where's the chat? Here it is. So we really want this to serve as kind of a hub for tools, templates, resources. Moving forward, it's still kind of in progress, and probably will always be a bit of a living document, work in progress sort of thing. But this again came out of that discussion with the presidents over the last fall that, you know, if we want to start a scholarship, like how do we even begin to think about that? And people were going out and asking all kinds of people for uh, ideas. And so we thought we'd centralize that information. Sorry, my AC turns off if I don't walk past it. I don't know how to make it not do that. And it's getting very hot in my room. So give me 2 seconds to turn. There you go, my AC back on. And we've been building this out slowly but surely. We have easy access here to the WIM USA bylaws, and then also easy access, and I'm just glad I'm realizing that the April board meeting minutes aren't there. Got to ask, or sorry, the April board slides aren't there. I've got to ask Stuart to get them there. So you should have easy access to the slide decks. This will link you to a Canva, which I didn't realize you had to be logged in to see that. Okay, cool. The individual ones will take you there, and you can view them whether you have a Canva account or not. But then also, I believe Stuart's PDFing them and putting them in the same folder as the meeting minutes. And so it dates back to uh, there used to be 20, yeah, dates back quite a ways, but you should be able to get meeting minutes from this folder. We also send them out via email after the meetings. This is a summary of the national representative roles and responsibilities, so kind of what's expected of national reps. And then chapter election best practices is in here. This is that more detailed set of suggestions or guidance that we talked about in the leadership meeting that I mentioned. So we didn't spend as much time going through all those details today. we will continue to build this out, and soon front and center will be the slides from this meeting and the other governance meeting we had 2 weeks ago, as well as the recordings as a reference. And we'll likely turn some of the slides into like lists in this table of contents here too, so you don't have to always go sifting through the deck to find certain information. The admin hub is basically just a little intro to Stuart, who's our executive admin. He works about 8 hours a week. It's spread throughout the week, depending on the week and like what's needed of him. And so patience is important when it comes to Stuart. I've noticed some people don't realize he only works 8 hours a week. We are actively on a path to hiring dedicated full-time support. We are not quite there yet, but we are planning to hire an executive director in the near future. In the meantime, Stuart is a very kind, wonderful gentleman that will help you with whatever you need or do his best to help you. There is a request form here where you can submit an admin request to him. It gathers some information. You can see the different requests that were filed over the month of May. Currently, he's still taking requests via email, but at some point we may switch to basically you got to put it through the form in order to get him to hop on it, just because it's hard for him to manage all the different requests that come in via email from all the different chapters. He's got a lot on his plate. And this way, others can also see a little dashboard of all the different stuff that he's working on. The scholarship hub is basically, again, suggestion rather than direction. It goes through all the I kind of the suggested structure for coming up with a scholarship program. And so we built this out by going through all the different chapters that do have scholarship programs. And we have one section that's like, here's what WIM chapters are doing. Most base eligibility on X, Y, and Z. They also prioritize A, B, and C, etc. What does the application look like? What's their award structure? And then how do they select those folks and who's on the committee, etc. And then we have some recommended best practices. It's hard to focus on financial need, for example, unless you're part of like a scholarship. U of A calls it the scholarship universe. If you can't get FAFSA information, you have to rely on people reporting out their financial need, which just can be kind of awkward. And so, again, this is all suggestion, not direction. So, but it's meant to be here for you to use as a resource when you're either starting a scholarship, revamping one, etc. And then finally, the last tab we have up currently is the chapter hub. You can find chapter leadership contact information in here. And you can find our chapter leadership meeting slides. We're not having one in June because this is serving as the chapter leadership meetings for June. The governance calls are. But we'll add our slides here after each meeting. So if you miss it, you can come and kind of see what was talked about. We have been inviting every meeting. The intention is to have a presentation from a chapter president or chapter leader that focuses on something that they do well, or it could focus on a challenge that they're having that they're working their way through so that other chapters can learn from it. So Emily Hagena presented last month on their kind of hybrid meeting structure where they hold a virtual meeting with 3 kind of hubs, and then they break after the virtual portion if there's a speaker, whatever it might be, and have like an in-person networker sort of thing. Paloma from Arizona presented a different time on the Arizona Ambassador Program, which has really helped Arizona's membership base and helped us stay connected across the state. We had Kim present on Montana's newsletter. They kind of revamped and reinvigorated their newsletter. And so if you've got something that your chapter does really well that other chapters could learn from, we'd love to have you come and present on that. And then that's usually 15-minute presentation with 5 or 10 minutes for questions. And then USA provides whatever updates or needs or whatever might be going on. And there's plenty of time usually for discussion and Q&A. So the intention is for presidents to attend whenever they can, but they can also share it with anybody else in their chapter that wants to attend. And then this should probably say WIM Arizona Ambassador Program. These are the slides from Paloma's presentation. We'll probably just add those up here, actually. And then you can also get to your membership lists here. And so I think you've all already seen this, but we made a small change that basically gives you your new members and your expired members. It's just a Google Sheets formula, so it's not perfect, but this was a request. You wanted to be able, some people wanted to be able to reach out and welcome their new members and reach out to expired members and say, we're sorry to lose you, uh, please come back, whatever that might look like. So hopefully that's been useful to you all. And then coming soon, I guess Debbie, I can probably share the last bit of slides. I think there's only a couple more. Coming soon, we are working on having a bit of a fundraising hub, so kind of best practices there, a PR and comms or marketing hub with templates and resources there, like Canva templates, etc. And then also tips, tricks, and templates for bylaws. I think Mackenzie's planning on having kind of like a really blank slate bylaws. In the past, we've just sent out examples of other chapters bylaws, which will also still be available to you, but blank slate kind of you can fillable format sort of thing. Event planning templates or tips and tricks, and then also budgeting templates or tips and tricks. So if you don't see something that's already there that you think should be, or you have suggestions, we'd love to hear them. It's really meant to be a resource for you all. And so we'll just keep building it out as time goes on, keep it updated so that it doesn't get out of date, and just really hope that it is effective as a resource. Any questions on the collaboration space or the resources or things you think that you haven't seen that you want to see?
Hey, really quick, Julia, you showed a moment ago the national rep information. Where can one find that so I can send that to the new national reps?
In the collaboration space link that I shared in the chat.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? All right. So governance sounds boring, but effective governance should make leadership easier. And just really grateful that you all were willing to spend a few hours over the last couple weeks to come together and kind of ensure we're all on the same page. As I mentioned, we will continue to offer this once a year moving forward. If you have suggestions for what we should spend more or less time on, our ears are open. As with the collaboration space, this is for your benefit. So we want your feedback. And next year, if you have something that you think we should add, we'd love to do it. Thank you so much for being here today, and also just for all the time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears, hopefully not blood, you commit to your chapters and this organization as a whole. Really grateful to have you all, and yeah, just glad that you're all investing in yourselves in your chapter. It's Friday, and we're ending 35 minutes early so that you all can go have fun and do whatever it is you do on a Friday. So
Julia,
have a great
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paloma.
Yeah, so for the newsletter for Q2, when is the deadline? June, the end of June, or first week of July?
I don't remember what she put in the request. Let me see. Good question. And maybe she didn't put it in the request. She did not. Yeah, I would say assume end of June, but if it's different from that, I'll have her reach out and provide a different deadline. But I would say assume end of June, because I think the goal
End
is,
of June.
yeah, to have the first one be early next quarter, which would be like
Yeah.
July-ish.
Mhm.
And
July.
so basically if you don't, we may not include every detail that you provide, it'll kind of depend, but give us as much information as you can. And if you want to prioritize it, that's helpful, etc. Add pictures. Pictures are great. Whatever you can provide is really useful. So
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Julia.
No problem. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Julia.
Appreciate it. everything that you guys have put together.
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate you as well.
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Bye, y'all.